Welcome, welcome, everyone. It's good to have you here on my channel. This is Dawn Del Vecchio, and I am very pleased and honored to be speaking with you today, introducing you to an extraordinary woman where we're going to have a conversation about, of all things, taking up space. So that might seem a little like, oh, what does she mean by that? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore today from the perspective of the divine feminine energies, from the energies of how we can be in highest service for our family, planetary ascension, awakening, and the betterment of humanity. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about my guest today, and then we'll introduce her. So Irene Chong is a personal friend, and she is the founder of the Taking Up Space Summit, of which I'm very grateful to be on this upcoming one, this second iteration of it. And she is a certified results and international creativity coach, a creative mentor, an astrologer like myself, an energy healer, guide, and teacher. And Irene is the founder of the Alignment Journeys, a business that was born out of a desire to fill the gaps in knowledge that are not readily available in conventional educational systems. So if you know my work, you can probably see already why Irene and I resonate with each other and our work in the world. So through her Aligned Woman's Way, an art of creating space, SPACE, which we're going to dive into in a few moments, that fosters and facilitates feminine flow, Irene teaches women how to tap into and access their innate intuition and wisdom, that inner wellspring we all have from which beauty and ease naturally flow. Irene is on a mission to empower heart-centered women to shine in their authentic radiance and beauty. She works with her clients to craft and curate every aspect of their lives so that they get to live the masterpiece that they dream of. It's really an honor to welcome you today, Irene. Thank you for joining me here on this call.
Thank you so much for having me, Dawn. And as you were reading out my bio and I was tuning into the space, I think I understand why you decided to go with that background now, because it just reminds me of the feminine flow that we are both, in service of. So that's really wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just to acknowledge, I mean, I know I'm looking a little on the orange side. Just for those of you who are wondering, where's my other background? Well, I'm still in the Southeast Asia, and what's truly behind me is not very pretty. So this is the pretty background and the orange face. But so let's move now forward into this whole energetic around taking up space. Now you've got this incredible summit coming up, second round of this. So I want to talk about that. And I also want to really hear from you, really, where did this come from? What does taking up space mean to you? And what is that acronym SPACE?
Yeah, thank you. Beautiful questions, Dawn. And first, I'd like to begin by just letting you know and thanking you for being a part of my summit. I can't wait for the audience to hear your incredible wisdom and transmissions. Yeah, so taking up space. I definitely feel that we teach what we most need to learn. And I know that for myself, for the longest time, it was really difficult and hard for me to take up space. And by that, I mean choosing not to stay small, choosing to express my truth and authenticity versus just trying to fit into a cookie cutter role that society, family, my education system had prescribed for me. So there are so many angles I can go in, along this line, but let me just talk about two things. Number one, when I came up with core principles that I wanted to share with my audience, it just beautifully landed into the acronym of SPACE. And it wasn't something that I'd intentionally done. I think it was really like inspirational flow that came through. So as you mentioned, SPACE is an acronym. And, all these are divine feminine principles that I subscribe to, that I live and practice every day, and which I now teach. So very quickly, S stands for self-love, which is the foundation of which everything else rests on. Because if we don't know how to love ourselves, and what does that even mean? Because again, love is a word that has been distorted And it's bandied about so often, but a true understanding of what love is can be hard to grasp when there's so much noise. So, and especially as women, I find that it's so much easier. The conditioning and programming is for us to serve, to nurture, to take care of others. But we then forget to tend to our needs, to cherish and honor our desires. So
Mm.
self-love, that's S. And then next, pleasure. So again, in this hyper-masculine world that we are living in, that is so achievement-oriented, it's always about striving and pushing and hustling, getting to the next thing. It's very goal-oriented, and the process is forgotten along the way. And that's actually why I named my business Alignment Journeys, because it is the journey that is primary and key. You know, all of us, human beings on this planet Earth, leading a spiritual, we're trying our best to live our spiritual truth. And a lot of the times, the marketing out there is about arriving at an endpoint. There's an ultimate destination of enlightenment. But actually, the process is just as important as the ultimate destination. So pleasure, that is also a very feminine principle. Pleasure in our bodies, pleasure in the way we go about living our world. So I feel that that is also a feminine principle that has been lost in this, overly patriarchal world that we're living in. And then A, authenticity. That's actually the one I would love to talk about most. So I'm going to come back to that because I feel
Okay.
that authenticity is a word that is really coming up to the forefront these days. And when I think about taking up space, I really mean taking up space from an authentic place. So I'm going to come back to this and I'll circle back to this. But let me quickly move on to C and E. So C, creativity. That's what we as women, biologically, physiologically, we have the power to create and birth life. But on an energetic level as well, we carry that beautiful creatrix codes that allow us to give birth, to hold space and allow new projects, new, whatever it is that we desire to be birthed. And again, I feel that this is something that has been neglected and ignored. There is a lot of emphasis on the masculine way of doing things. But in the feminine, it's about being, it's about creating that magnetic space and being a space holder for things to then blossom and come into being. I like to think of this as, using nature as an analogy. The idea of flowers, when they just bloom and flower in their gorgeous beauty, they don't seem to be doing anything per se, but they help with, they're essential to enable nature to flourish because they assist with the reproductive and growth process. So
Mhm.
creativity, I really see that as fundamental. And once you've got the building blocks in place, S, P, and A, this is where you really get to flourish. You're creating from a space of what you truly desire and want, from a space of joy and deep fulfillment, versus the very masculine, hyper masculine, toxic masculine way of like, okay, let's just hit targets. Let's just focus on the KPIs and forget about, the true purpose of creativity, which is to thrive and flourish. There's a lot of joy in that I feel is missing in our world right now. And then finally, E. And that to me is, if I had to think about an end point, E stands for easeful beauty. So the
Mm.
priestess path is on it's the beauty way. It's a reverence and an honor for the beauty of cosmic truth, of the divine. And that comes through not just physically, but energetically as well. So when I talk about beauty, I'm referring to easeful beauty. It's easeful, it's natural, it's not forced or pushed in any way. I feel that, again, in the world that we're living in, there is this idea of, there's a lot of artificial beauty.
Mhm.
Botox, right? Trying to look young, that obsession on youth. And I feel that we need to move away from that and look at what it is that really matters. What is true beauty? It has to come forth and shine and radiate from the inside. You know,
Yes.
um, a woman can look fully presentable and beautiful on the outside, but if in her inner realm, in her inner verse, she is unhappy and miserable, then no amount of cosmetic makeup is going to hide and cover up what is not coming forth from within. So a lot of the work that I do is to support women in shining their light, and not dimming, not hiding, not suppressing.
Mm.
So that's space in a nutshell. And I want to come
Mhm.
back to the idea of authenticity, if I may,
Yes. Yes.
because that relates to the summit and why I decided to come up with it. Because I feel that, there have been a lot of well, the way I see it, the feminist movement and the different waves that we're in, right, these days there's a lot of talk about like women leaning in, stepping up, showing up in the world. But how do we do that in a way that is authentic to our feminine wisdom and intelligence?
Mm.
Again, I see a lot of not necessarily performative, but it's almost like because the role models out there tend to be more masculine in nature, there is a forgetting of a different way of doing things that is more aligned with who we truly are, with our energetics. So
Yes.
authenticity. Mm. I've heard it said, I believe it was Dr. Gabor Mate, who highlighted that for human beings, there are two core needs that we have in order to survive. One is attachment, and the other is authenticity, to be authentic. But a lot of the times when growing up, because of our need for attachment, to fit in, for a sense of belonging, we sacrifice and we forego expressing our authentic needs.
Yep.
So that can take the form of putting on a mask, taking on roles that are acceptable versus what is actually true inside of us. So taking up space and authenticity, that really relates to, being unafraid to be fully who you are, owning the shadowy parts and understanding that the shadowy parts have a lot of treasure and gold, that it's okay to love all parts of ourselves. Again, there seems to be this hierarchy of what's good and what's not, a lot of duality. And I feel that in the divine feminine, there is this beautiful oneness and compassion that comes through when you connect with this. So bringing it all together, the ultimate, the ultimate journey that we're taking when it comes to taking up space is to be the co-creator of your life. That is the pinnacle of self-actualization, to live your full potential. And a lot of the times, and I think society actually encourages this, there's this victim mentality where we believe, due to this distorted narrative, that, oh, there's only so much we can do. It's the higher ups, the government, the politicians, or the leaders out there. And we forget that actually we're the leader of our lives, that we get to create the reality that we want. So taking up space and being the co-creator of your life ultimately means that you are taking ownership. You're reclaiming your power as a creatrix. And you're saying, this is the world that I want to see. And I'm going to do my part. Like I know that I have the power to take up full space and create what it is that I want to see in the world. So that in a nutshell is what taking up space means.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for unpacking that. And just to reiterate there, so self-love, pleasure, authenticity. What was C again?
Creativity
Creativity,
and
of course,
easeful.
creativity and easeful. Yes. And to the authenticity piece, I really appreciate your speaking into this more because we are literally shedding old masks, old layers of skin, old detritus of identifiers that were based in external structures of who we are, like, I'm an American woman who was born in this year and da, 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 and therefore I should da 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 da. You're a Singaporean woman born in da 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 da. All of that stuff is like it is sort of dissolving in the light of this new earth consciousness that's coming through. And one of the things that I see is that even those of us who've done a lot of shadow work to love up in frequency those aspects of ourselves that we would rather have hidden, we're going deep now, and we're still excavating some deeper iterations of places where we are not authentic because we haven't wanted to look at some aspect of self, patterning in the family, ways that we shoot ourselves in the foot, this kind of thing. And so this act of also self-love and self-acceptance is so important, not in the sense of mm, a permission slip for continuing to do things that don't serve us, but rather a recognition that until I see it, witness it, own it, it's not going to change. So I want to be able to own even those aspects. Oh, look at how look at that pattern that I do of eating too much sugar every time a little thing bothers me. Okay, that self-awareness brings us to the next opportunity for more healing and thereby more creativity. So you've really pulled together like an extraordinary thing here with the SPACE. I love it, and I feel like it's like a complete in and of itself. So
Mm.
with that, I would love, it sounds like, I mean, my next question was what inspired you to create the first summit? We kind of touched on that, but maybe you can share with us a little more about what's in store this year.
Yeah, yeah. First of all, I really want to respond to that beautiful piece that you shared, and thank you for that reflection as well. Because when I mentioned that self-love is the foundation, I also mentioned how there are all these distorted understandings. And that piece that you mentioned, that you brought up, is so key, because with self-awareness, and a lot of the women that I work with, are very intelligent, highly capable of, analyzing themselves. They have that self-awareness. But unfortunately, with that self-awareness also comes a lot of judgment and self-criticism,
Mm.
because the love is not there. It's almost like they are not allowed to accept all parts of themselves. So I just like to very briefly touch on and then relate it
Yeah.
back to the question that you asked.
Mm.
This whole idea around being honest and transparent, because in order to take up space, you first have to know who you are and own all parts of you. And that can be a messy, confusing, and intimidating process, because it's like looking in the mirror and having to confront all these parts of who you are. So one of the things I learned when I became trained as a coach was that there is this idea of the Karpman triangle, which I think you'll be familiar with as well, where there's this drama triangle that we often get caught up in. And I earlier mentioned that, I think society in a way reinforces this, because, that's how advertising works, basically. It induces fear, and then it says, oh, we'll come and rescue you if you buy our product. So in the Cartman triangle, there are three roles or three characters that we take on, and we sort of swing between each. There's the victim, which I mentioned, feeling that you're powerless and helpless. And then there's the rescuer, so the hero that steps in and saves the day. And then there's the persecutor, or the villain in the story, the bad guy, so to speak. And the truth is, all of us at some point in our lives, whether we like it or not, whether we are conscious of it or not, we take on one of these roles. So oftentimes, if we're stuck in the victim role, then we're like, oh, it's this other person who is doing such and such to me, poor me, like, and why is the world such a cruel place, right? So narratives like that. A lot of times I feel that women tend to take on the rescuer role. We want to be in that caregiving role where we step in and save somebody, because ultimately it helps us feel better about ourselves.
Yeah.
So there needs to be this honesty in confronting this aspect. Um, because oftentimes the rescuer can slip very easily into a martyr complex, and that's not healthy. And then
Yeah.
finally, the persecutor, a lot of times, like, I see this a lot in, pardon the term, but raging activists, like really angry and rageful. And as like when you talk about frequencies of consciousness, that's not the most healthy or high vibration to be in. But a lot of the times, when we step into that persecutor role, it's like we're angry and we're pointing fingers and we're saying that, it's the other person that is wrong. Why aren't all these people stepping up, etc. So that's this, what I call this Bermuda triangle that we can get lost in.
Yep.
And the whole idea of taking up space is to say, I'm going to step out of that. I'm going to step into another triangle. And I think the acronym for this is TED. But I like to think of it as another triangle, where instead of the victim, you are now the creator of your life.
Mhm.
You take full responsibility and ownership. And with responsibility, comes a lot of freedom and liberation, but it requires that honesty to be able to look at yourself and say, I own that, I was once victim, rescuer, persecutor. I own all of that. And now I choose different, because I get to be different.
Yeah.
So that's creator. And then instead of being a persecutor, this is where we take on the role of challenger, or when we are in difficult or challenging situations, we no longer project onto the other person and see him or her, or whatever the situation is, as the persecutor, as the problem. We see it as a challenge that we get to rise up and step up in our leadership and face it head on and be the change that we want to see in the world. So that's a
Mm.
more empowering way of looking at difficult or challenging circumstances in our lives. And
Yeah.
then finally, and
Oh,
then finally, the role of coach, instead of being a rescuer. So with a rescuer, it sometimes takes away the ability or the power that the other person has to step up,
yep.
because it can fall into a mollycoddling role. I'm thinking of like helicopter parenting, where in the interest of the child, a parent may just want to step in all the time and take over, but it doesn't enable the child to grow up with a healthy sense of his or her own power. So the idea of a coach is to hold space to facilitate that growth and that maturation process. So the reason I'm bringing all this up is because I was inspired to create this summit. Number one, firstly, on a personal level, for myself to take up more space, to be more visible. But number two, also to spread the message and the information and the wisdom that all the women speakers, including yourself, have, to get them to relook and shift their perspective to creator, coach, and challenger. I
Mm.
wanted them to be inspired to take on all these teachings, to receive and know that they have the power to co-create the life that they desire. So that sort of answers your question by highlighting this issue that I'm seeing in the world.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you very much for this. This is interesting because for all of my retreats as well as my 13 Moon mentorship program, one of the documents that every woman receives is the codependent triangle, where I go through these very much because it is such a pattern in our society that and of course, once we become aware of something, right, then we can change it. But if we're not aware of it, it can be very easy to fall into. And that's where that self-love comes in, of like accepting, oh, look, there I was being a victim again, or oh, there I was trying to be a codependent enabler or a helper again, instead of being a coach. So this is I think it's a very timely awareness for us all to have. And I always refer back to, and many people have before me, so it's not original, but that idea, when you travel, what do they say? Put your own, if the cabin loses oxygen, put your own oxygen mask on first. And I see this, and I've seen this for years. This is why I wrote my book. Spiritual healers, helpers, energy workers who would default into that undercharging and over delivering, over giving and that's part of that whole cycle too. And healing all of that and coming into our co-creative power is also to really evaluate and discern uh, fair exchange for what we do when we're coaching, like in a business sense, versus helping a friend or whatever. So this is a really beautiful, I didn't expect us to be unpacking this aspect, but I'm right there with you. I feel like it's a really significant time for us to fully, like, we're not playing those kids games anymore. That old 3D Matrix game, we're not doing that anymore. We're owning our sovereign right to be creative, to enjoy pleasure, and to be in healthy dynamics with others.
Oh, I really love everything that you just said there, Dawn. Taking up space, a lot of it is about owning your worth and value. So what you spoke about, like people doing this spiritual work tend to undercharge, they're, and all these projections, right? Oh, you're spiritual, you shouldn't be charging so much. But the whole idea of nourishing and nurturing yourself so that you are in a good space to then tend to other people, that cannot be emphasized enough. And I'm so glad you circled back to that idea of pleasure. It's not wrong for us to be enjoying the work that we're doing. I know that when I was first starting out, because I really, really enjoy holding space and being a coach for my clients, there was that little voice inside of me that said, oh my gosh, Irene, you're enjoying yourself so much. You're having so much fun, and this is filling your cup. How dare you charge money for it, But, and then I had to really come back to center and go, well, this is my calling, this is my mission, and it's perfectly okay for me to receive for, the work that I'm putting out there, and that it's perfectly okay. This is what I'm worth, and this is what's valuable. And again, not from a little ego space, because we were talking about this earlier. We are really just vessels and conduits for the divine feminine. But it is a lot of work to be a solid, sturdy vessel so that we can then hold space and expand our energy field for other people. And I do feel that, there's this feminine flow that is reciprocal, because the feminine is relational in nature. It isn't just me and then the other person. There's this beautiful exchange and flow. And I feel that when we stop ourselves and we say, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be charging, for example, not only are we devaluing our worth, but we are also putting a stop to the abundance and flow that the universe actually wants to gift us with.
Yes, well said. And of course, if we keep undercharging, then we end up being unresourced ourselves, and then we don't help anyone. So it's like breathing, you can't keep breathing out, breathing out, breathing out, breathing out. You got to breathe back in too. So yeah, thank you for this. So before I ask our last question, I just want to remind everyone that the Take Up Space Summit, if you're watching this in the context of the timing when this is rolling out, it is a free event, and you can register by clicking the link below of this video in the information box. So please go ahead and do that. Click through. It'll open up in a new tab. It's no cost for you, and then you're going to get to really immerse yourself in the wisdom of feminine leaders who are taking up space in a way that allows for beauty, self-love, pleasure, creativity, all of that. So with that, let me just ask my final question for you, Irene, if you want to share any highlights about what we can expect for this year's Take Up Space Summit.
Yeah, thank you. And with this question, I feel inspired to share what I did last year. So there was the very first time I hosted my summit, and it was such a beautiful experience to hear back. And I received overwhelmingly positive feedback. And that's the reason why I decided to do the second iteration. So for Take Up Space 1, the theme was around unlocking the wisdom and secrets of feminine energetics. And then this year, the download that I received was, oh, we need to inspire more women to step up in the full expression. Like, our voices need to be heard. And that's easy to say, but right, how do you go about doing it? So I decided to, I think this year's theme is to step up into full expression with courage and beauty. I do feel that the times we're living in are ripe and so opportune for more women to step up and speak up and just express who they are. When I talk about taking up space and speaking up, right, and expressing yourself, I'm not just talking about with our voices, but through all other ways, through the ways that we live our lives on the personal front, and then also on the professional level. Definitely, I'm sensing that a lot of women these days, and I think this is like a global shift that's happening across the world. They want to step out of the old paradigm, the old matrix, and they want to create something that feels genuine and true and fulfilling for themselves. It could be stepping out into entrepreneurship, but a lot of the times they don't quite know how. And again, the hypermasculine way of doing things is, okay, I'm going to take all these courses. There's this checklist of to-dos that you've got to tick off, but there's a forgetting of the wisdom that lies in our feminine intelligence, that there's a different, more magnetic way of approaching every aspect of your life, personal and also in our professional lives. So I really hope that the audience who gets to attend and watch all the teachings will be inspired in some way to up-level their lives and be more expansive, to fully own and claim the space that they are deserving of. Yeah.
Blessed be, and so it is. Please be sure, everyone, to click the link below and register for this event. And even if you are a man and you feel some resonance with this, absolutely. We all carry the feminine and masculine within us. We are all learning how to reintegrate the feminine aspects of creativity. So there's great wisdom here for you. And Irene, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day and your sacred work in the world to join me for this. I look forward to sharing my piece and witnessing all the other wisdom keepers that are going to be on the summit this year. So thank you so much again.
Mm.
Again, everyone, go ahead and click below.